So welcome to another DCI interview series here. We are with Jesse from PWCC, so thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah,
So
man, appreciate having me on.
Yeah. So want to start with the Mint Collective, the show that we're at.
Yeah.
What is your impression of the show?
I've honestly loved it. The fact that they had to move it, the scheduling was kind of a nightmare. Obviously not their fault because of COVID, but we have been needing a trade show in our market or a gathering that is elevated.
Yeah.
Right. We've had the same old 6-foot tables, tablecloths, and display cases for the last 20 years. And I mean, even at the National, there's a lot of booths, but you don't get the corporate vibe. It always felt like a hobby, right? And this is the first show that I've actually been to where I feel like we're turning from a hobby, which I've used this term before, to an industry, right?
Sure.
There's a lot of money getting poured into our space. I mean, you can see it by some of the beautiful booths here. It feels a little bit more corporate, which, from a collector standpoint, some collectors don't like that because they feel like they're getting priced out of stuff. But for our market to mature and for the industry to grow, like, it's a natural progression for us to get to this phase. And I'm just so happy that, the Mint Collective happened, IMG Collectible, their partnership, bringing all of these, industry minds to one space.
Yep.
It's been incredible.
Yeah. It's definitely so much more of a business mixed with the hobby that elevates into an industry, like you said, right?
Right.
We have the vendors here. We do have the people who are out here selling cards.
Yep.
I've heard they've done well, which is really good
I have
too.
too, right? That's the wild card for a show like
Correct.
this.
Yeah, because if you don't get them, they're not going to come back. But
Right.
I think that there's going to be a lot of people who had, now FOMO of not being here, and I think this show will continue to grow.
I've actually already seen that on Instagram. People
That's
saying
good.
like, I'm having FOMO. I'm not
Yep.
a Mint Collective. It looks like there's a lot of good deals going down, a lot of good trades happening.
Yeah.
Amazing elevated conversations with, guys like you, bigger corporations. So, top to bottom, soup to nuts, it's been a fantastic show.
Very cool. So is there one thing that has been your favorite thing you've attended, something you've seen?
Right.
What's been your favorite of the weekend?
Outside of you and I about to go meet Jerry Rice.
Yeah, well, that is going to happen. That one we can't wait for.
Honestly, some of the business conversations that I've had with, potential partners in the space, guys that, are CEOs or presidents of companies that you don't get to see in person very often, especially with COVID. You've had,
Sure.
I have guys that I've had multiple phone conversations with, Zoom calls with, and we've actually never been able to shake hands in person.
Got it.
And I'm a face-to-face guy. I like that interaction.
Yeah.
So it's been really nice to actually sit down with people, have a good conversation, and talk about what we've discussed over the phone.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So can you give us the history of PWCC? Like, how did it get started,
Sure.
and even how you got involved?
Yeah.
Our fans would love to know.
Yeah. So it honestly started on eBay as, Brent Higgins started selling cards for people on eBay. He's actually an engineer. He has 2 engineering degrees. So he did it. He just loved vintage cards. PWCC actually stands for Pre-War Card Collector. Right.
Got it. Okay. I actually never knew that.
Yeah. So, but now obviously we sell everything.
Sure.
So it's a natural progression, but that's the history of our company. He started small, selling stuff for people on eBay. It grew and grew and grew. I was in this industry from about 2010, 2013, 14, and I just worked for a dealer in the space, got into real estate in Portland, and Brent had actually moved the company up in 2016 from the Bay Area to Portland. He reached out to me in 2017, and we stayed in touch because I knew him from when I was in the industry before.
Got it.
2017, he reached out to me. He's like, hey, I'm looking for a piece of commercial property to build a new building for our office. I was in residential. He needed commercial. I referred him a guy. Jumping forward to 2018, I wish him a happy birthday on Cinco de Mayo, which is his birthday. And he's like, hey, I was just thinking about you. Like, we should actually talk. So once again, long story short, made me an offer I couldn't turn down. I got back into the trading card space like late 2018, early 19, and we're at where we are now.
Got it.
Yeah.
And then the main forms of business for PWCC now, a lot of people have heard of the vault
Sure.
that you guys do.
Yep.
You could tell us a little bit about that, but what else does PWCC? Is there other things besides the vault?
Well, yeah. So that building that he was talking about building
Yeah.
in 2017, like, it was the vault. So this vault concept that now everybody is adhering to and trying to emulate is something that, Brent's a visionary. He's one of my closest friends, and I think he's a genius, and he understands our space really well. He had this idea back in 2017, and his pitch to me was literally talking about trading cards as a tangible asset. So he was the first person I had ever heard, and I think that's probably true for our entire market to ever
Yeah.
talk about trading cards as a tangible asset. So, the vision of PW was the vault, which we've had for like 3 years now.
Yep.
We also lend on trading cards in the vault. So we have, roughly 50 million in loans out on trading cards that are in our vault in our possession as collateral.
Got it.
We obviously have our premier auction, our high-end platform.
Yep.
We now have weekly auctions that end every single Sunday. So every time you go to the PWCC website, there's cards that are up for sale. At auction, we have our fixed price marketplace, so you can stick your collection in the vault. It's all digitally archived for you. You can access it from anywhere in the world. At a click of a button, you can list it for fixed price. You can send it to auction. You can sell it yourself and ship it out. It's kind of, it's the digital representation of your asset. So basically, the NFT talk is everywhere, right?
Sure.
We've basically been doing NFTs for 3 years.
Got it.
So
Yeah.
that's really,
Yeah. Exactly.
That's really what it is. It's a digital representation of your physical asset.
Yeah. You guys didn't turn it into a token, but it is still
Correct.
the digital representation
Correct.
of that. Yeah.
Correct.
Of something you already own.
Yep. Exactly.
Technically.
Exactly.
Okay. Very, very cool. So, over the course of this weekend, what was the goal for PWCC to be here? Obviously, business relationships, but are you guys out here doing education for consumers? Like, what does the rest of it look like as a business?
Yeah, so we've actually made a pretty big push this year to go to a lot more trade shows.
Okay.
I know you guys are super active in going to
Yeah.
trade shows, and you probably didn't see us a ton last year, right? Outside of the national and maybe 1 or 2 other shows. But we're going to about 2 a month now as a company. And it's really just getting out, shaking some hands, talking to people, like you said, educating people on what we do as a service, but also offering auction drop-offs, vault drop-offs in person where they can come bring their stuff, drop it off. We ship it back for free, fully insured with an armored truck service. And so, for us, like that's part of the show, but also like you mentioned, the business relationships, the conversations that we've had. This is the type of trade show that I don't go to all the trade shows, but this is one that I had to come to. I knew I had to come to, and I'm very, very glad I did.
Yeah, that's amazing. So as we make a little transition here into sports card grading, obviously that's been one of the big things that's out there, right? So what is your impression of the card grading companies? A necessity? Where you stand on that?
Yeah, so it is a necessity because you need validation for the masses, right? Like the educational aspect, going back to that again, it's not easy for a consumer who doesn't have a long history in our market to be able to look at a card and value it unless they have a guide. Now, the truth about grading is it's an opinion, right? And you guys know that, and it's just the way it's been forever. So, you guys can have an opinion, PSA can have an opinion, Beckett, SGC, everybody can have an opinion on this card, and it can all be different.
Yeah.
So it's a guide.
Yep.
It's not necessarily fact. It's a guide, but I think it's critically important at least to have that guide for consumers to feel protected when they're buying assets.
Gotcha. And the authentication to make sure,
Of
hey,
course,
that company is back, that this is real.
That
too.
little thing, yes, that's
Yeah,
big too.
that's a big one. So,
Yeah.
In your opinion, over the course of this, what have the card grading companies done well in this industry?
What they've done well, it's been a maturation process. Obviously there's been a lot of growth in the last few years. So I think what they've done well is they've created a guide. They've created this market and what people look at and people can reference when you need to buy something, right? And if you're buying on any platform, it doesn't matter where it is, you need to have a professional opinion of somebody. So, I don't want to talk about any grading company specifically, but certain companies do things better than others.
Sure.
Look, everyone has their strengths and weaknesses, right?
Yep.
And not everyone's perfect, but we have a pretty good blend of grading companies in the market. But I love you guys coming in, your guys' reputation. Now that you have a SLAB product, I think it's awesome, and I'm excited to see you guys grow. And I think it's well needed, especially with your guys' presence at trade shows. I think that's critical for people to come in, whether it is your review here at the show for $10, or if it's a SLAB product, you guys offering that full suite of services for people at shows in person.
Yeah,
that's a big deal.
Yeah, that makes sense. So a lot of that gets missed from, and I understand why, right? These larger scale companies have scaled, and they just don't have the time and ability to do all these things necessarily either. So
100%.
Yeah.
With the pandemic that happened, COVID, all that stuff, they got bogged down, obviously, right? So backlog created a huge problem for them, and you guys have the advantage of being lean and mean and new.
Sure.
And you can set it up the right way from the beginning.
Yep.
But what happened with the pandemic, obviously there weren't as many trade shows, but you guys were still out there. You guys are still out there shaking hands, meeting with people, and there's not a lot of that from the grading companies that are at shows. They might show up every once in a while.
Yep.
But in the past, and it might change, but
Yep.
in the past, there haven't been a lot of these companies that actually show up to trade shows. And the fact that I keep saying it, but the fact that you guys do it, it's really important for the industry.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we appreciate that. So the next 2 to 5 years of the hobby or the industry, because I agree, it's become an industry, right? I don't think this is a hobby. The next 2 to 5 years, what does that look like? What do you think?
I see some consolidation going on, continue to go on. Obviously, everyone talks about Fanatics and what they're doing. I think that their role and their job in this market is critical. In order to keep growing, we have to reach the masses, right? So Fanatics having roughly 80 million users or whatever the number is, that's a big pool of potential customers for our market. And, they're already sports fans, right?
Yep.
So we believe since day one that this is the most pervasive tangible asset and that this market is still in its infancy stages. Now, I echo that and repeat that. But, I think that what's going to happen too is there's going to be a few grading companies that are new, and they're going to kind of battle it out, and we'll see who rises to the top. But you guys being present is a huge advantage.
Sure,
huge advantage for you. So grading companies are going to be interesting to see who kind of rises to the top. And then I think from a like marketplace perspective, obviously we have our marketplaces, but then vaulting. So we have a big head start on everybody.
Yeah.
Right. We've had it for 3
sure.
years, a ton of inventory, but the digital archival of assets, NFTs, fractionalization, all these things, they're huge. Right.
Yep.
So I love that there's different ways to do it too. You have, the collectible route, you have the dibs route, you have all these guys that are doing it different ways. I think we're also going to see what's right and what's wrong because nobody really knows yet, right?
Correct. True.
And obviously we're looking at it. It'll be a natural fit eventually for us to get involved in that in some capacity, but we don't know what's right either. So we have people vetting it, looking into it, but there's a lot of moving pieces in our market right now. It's almost overwhelming, so, and there's a lot of money pouring into it from an institutional perspective, setting up these markets, these grading companies, fractional, all that stuff. And it will happen where some won't work out and some will. But it's gonna be a fun 2 to 5 years, that's for sure.
Yeah. Now, is PWCC only doing cards vaulted right now, or are memorabilia, is that going to move into that realm or no?
Right now, we don't really do much memorabilia.
Okay.
So we really wanted to focus on trading cards, which we're experts in trading cards, right?
Sure.
So we've put a lot of our time and energy into perfecting things regarding trading cards, and the operational efficiencies around trading cards are the easiest out of any tangible asset, right?
Got
it's
it.
small, you can store it wherever, right?
Yep.
We do vault graded assets, so comics, video games. We also do wax, whatever it may be.
Yep.
We do have some memorabilia in the vault, but the thing about memorabilia is it's harder to image, it's harder to ship, it's harder to store, right? It's not as easy from an operational perspective to do memorabilia. Is it natural for us to eventually get into these spaces? Probably.
Yeah.
But we're not focusing on them until we feel like we've perfected trading cards.
Got it. That makes a ton of sense. So, as you guys can, continue down the business route, do you see any other disruptors or disruptions coming into the market?
I mean, I think Fanatics is the obvious answer, right? They have what I feel like is a super important job, and they have to gate the product that is released into our market, and they have to design it. They have to control all of that, right? So they have a direct impact on the consumer, on local card shops, on marketplaces, on grading. They literally touch everything. So their job in how they handle what they need to handle is crazy important for where we're going to end up as a market, and really unlocking also, like we mentioned, the masses and getting more people into the space.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. So where can we find you? Where do we find PWCC? Kind of give a little bit of that info.
Sure. Well, we're based out of Oregon. So also one of the advantages of having the vault is you ship it to Oregon, and the sales tax e-commerce wise is based on the shipping address. So it's free to ship to the vault.
Okay. That's a huge savings.
Yeah. Sorry, it's not free to ship it. It's free from a sales tax perspective. Yeah. But we're online, pwccmarketplace.com. Like I said, we have a monthly premier auction, which is our high-end assets that typically over $20K. And then we have our weekly auction that ends every single Sunday. We have cards listed fixed price in our marketplace. You can check that out as well. And we have some fun announcements and big announcements coming in the next 6 months. So we're excited about all of it.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Thank you. So Jesse Craig from PWCC, Thank you very
Hey,
much.
man.
Thanks
Appreciate
for
you
coming
having me. Thanks.